We're going to give a few minutes for people to join us. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, please add your questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll be answering them as we go through this plática. So we're just going to give a few seconds more for people to start to log in. I think we're starting our Facebook Live. There we are. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this very important conversation that will center around land acknowledgement, community, curanderismo. We'll be hearing from Grace Sesma, a cultural practitioner and educator who provides culturally relevant psychological, spiritual counsel and support. She's the founder of Mana of Imperial Valley, a consultant trainer with the SDSU Academy for Professional Excellence Tribal Star Program, and yearly since 2007 serves as the elder in residence at the Iskotu and Kumik First Nations lodges in Ottawa, Canada. In addition to her curandismo practice, Grace has the roles in our community for community building and social justice coalitions, helping organize grassroots advocacy groups. She's the member of the Kumeyaay Original Peoples Alliance, Kanab Kuwan Han. And I'm sorry, Grace, you're going to have to help me.
Kanapkohan Tell the Truth Coalition.
Thank you, Grace. Women's March of San Diego and House of the Moon, Missing and Murdered Indigenous People. Thank you, Grace. We appreciate all the time you're taking, spending time with us today to share your knowledge and your wisdom. In February, we heard from Daniel Watman and Dr. Stanley Rodriguez about the construction of the border wall and how that impacts our surrounding communities, in particular the Kumeyaay peoples that are native to our borderlands. This is where San Diego sits today. The information you're going to share today is an extension of that discussion, and it's a shift also to looking at the importance of community and ancestral teachings in the healing process. So we cannot thank you enough, Grace, for opening this space to us and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Muchas gracias, Dulce. It's an honor to be with all of you, especially coming after the previous guests. I know that they shared some really good information. And so for me, sharing some of this information is important in the sense that we are guests on the original people's lands here, specifically Kumeyaay land, where I am. I come to you from Alpine. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Because the land acknowledgements that I hear different groups and organizations talk about always seems very sort of cut and dry. And what lately I have been approached by some community groups asking me for help in guiding them through the process of either how do you do a land acknowledgement, how do we reach out, who do we reach out to, which is sort of a sad commentary that still, in spite of all the efforts by Kumeyaay people and their allies, their other relatives here, there's still so many people that don't know very much about the original peoples of this is what's known as San Diego County and Imperial County. So to me, I wanted to start off with the land acknowledgement that San Diego State University first did a couple of years ago. And it was crafted by Michael Connolly, who goes by Michael Mishquish. And it reads, "We stand upon a land that carries the footsteps of millennia of Kumeyaay people. They are a people whose traditional life ways intertwine with the worldview of earth and sky in a community of living beings. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay people to the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in the forces of life. For the Kumeyaay, red and black represent the balance of those forces that provide for harmony within our bodies as well as the world around us. As students, faculty, staff, and alumni of San Diego State University, we acknowledge this legacy from the Kumeyaay. We promote this balance in life as we pursue our goals of knowledge and understanding. We find inspiration in the Kumeyaay spirit to open our minds and hearts. It is the legacy of the red and the black. It is the land of the Kumeyaay. And it's a beautiful land acknowledgement that was written by Michael. And what I have noticed is that universities reach out to the original peoples, as they should, for help. But there's other organizations that are either companies or corporations that are looking for help from Indigenous people to craft a land acknowledgement. And most of the time, they have a misguided view of what that means. They feel that the work that is involved in crafting land acknowledgements and bringing people together is something that is not necessarily compensated. And it's a lot of work that takes place. And I think that is another factor in the land acknowledgement. I mean, there's many aspects that go into crafting a land acknowledgement, as well as the intention behind the land acknowledgement. It should not be just a rote statement. It should be a process of establishing relationships with the original people on the land on which these organizations stand. Next slide, please. There's pieces of the whole process that it seems to me that there's some fear perhaps, but it's also that they're afraid of creating a backlash amongst either alumni, or in case of companies or organizations, they're afraid of what the non-Indigenous community is going to say. Are they going to lose support? Instead of really working on the relationship aspect of it and educating their community, looking at it as creating a relationship, which is something that we as Indigenous people, that's what we do. We work together, but it's based on relationships. It's based on family kinship. It's based on shared experiences. It's based on just being, that we know that we are to be good guests on other people's land. Just like we go into someone's home, we want to be a good guest. We usually will bring something to them. We'll bring a gift. We bring groceries. We bring flowers, if maybe wine or soda. We create that relationship. So to me, the land acknowledgement is very important, but there's a lot of steps that go into first establishing that relationship, reaching out, deciding what it is that you as an organization or as an individual aspire to do as part of acknowledging that you're on Native land. It's not enough to say, oh yes, I'm on Kumeyaay land. That to me is not being a good guest. The next slide. Indigenous protocols are very important because it establishes how we behave with one another in the present and in the future. And I liked this explanation that was given by Charles Sepulveda as the Tongva concept of kuyum, or being a guest. And so to me, part of the land acknowledgement is the reimagining of human relationships to place outside of the structures of the dominant culture, because it's different. And if you're a guest, shouldn't you make that effort? Make the effort to introduce yourself. That's how I've always been taught, that you introduce yourself when you go to somebody else's land. When I first came back to San Diego a few years ago, one of the first things that I did was reach out to Kumeyaay elder Ron Chrisman And I had heard of him through many of my friends in the Chicano community, because he and his wife, Virginia, were holding sweat lodges and being very welcoming to other indigenous people, non-Kumeyaay indigenous people. So I called and I introduced myself. I told him about myself. I told him that on the paternal side of my family, that we're mestizo Yaqui, that we come from San Miguel de Orcasito, Sonora, and that on my mother's side, I grew up with the understanding that we are also mestizo and Kumeyaay, but that I didn't have the documentation, and that I do remember as a child in Ensenada going to some of the communities and being with people that I understood them to be my relatives. So we talked at length, and he very generously and kindly welcomed me and said, you're welcome, you're back home. So you're welcome to bring your medicine, because to me, when I called them, it wasn't so much that I wanted to claim a relationship that I was not quite sure of, a kinship, but rather that as someone who is a cultural practitioner, someone who is asked for help from the Chicano Mexican community and others as a curandera, that it was important for me to introduce myself and tell him about my work and ask for his blessings to bring an outside medicine onto Kumeyaay land. To me, that is the core of what I have been taught, that you introduce yourself to an elder or elders as the first step in being able to be a good guest, to be able to bring your medicina to their land, to be able to serve the people on their land. So I want to thank the Chrisman family, because they have been nothing but gracious since I first returned to San Diego. And I also want to thank the Kumeyaay Nation as a whole, because the Kumeyaay Nation, as I understand it from Quetzan elders who are related to Elder Preston Arrowweed, told me probably about 25, 30 years ago, no, about 20 years ago, told me that the Quetzan people and the Kumeyaay peoples had welcomed Yaqui people fleeing Sonora, fleeing the Spanish, fleeing some of the Mexican government actions, and were welcomed to stay at intervals and then permanently in some of Quetzan territory, Quetzan land, Kumeyaay land, here what is today San Diego area, as well as in Baja California. And in fact, there was a lot of subsequent relationships established, intermarriages. So I say thank you to all of them for welcoming my Yaqui side of my ancestors onto their lands from generations and helping us to feel settled and safe here. And
We're
so
going to be putting, Grace, the links to the maps around the U.S. so people can look up the originals, people on whose land they sit, so they can begin this relationship building, so they can introduce themselves and figure out who's there, whose land they are standing on. And so on the links, people can look that up and begin as a first step, like you said, this introduction.
Yes, exactly. And that is part of healing our community. So for people who are saying, why is this linked up somehow with healing the community and curanderismo? It's because the way we heal is by reestablishing good relationships with our other relatives. The next slide. So I wanted you to see my tatas and my grandfathers and my grandmothers there. So being a good guest for me has been a journey of listening, of going to gatherings, getting to meet other Kumeyaay relatives here, being at Chicano Park, being a part of the community, extending myself in the sense of, what do you need? How can I support you? I hope that I have not come with the attitude that some people have of, I'm going to tell you what to do because this is what you should be doing, but rather to be, as we say in curanderismo, the way I was taught is, ¿cómo puedo servirle? How may I be of service? That, to me, that is really important. So in the land acknowledgement, so what does it mean for you who are listening? If you're a guest, if you're not Kumeyaay, or if you're not, or depending on where you're living from that area, what does it take for you to be a good guest? Do you know whose land you're on? Have you extended yourself to go to some of the gatherings? Have you tried to learn who the elders are? Are you meeting them? Are you finding out what are the issues that are important to the original peoples? Are you willing to make relationships? Are you willing to go through the process of establishing a friendship with people? Are you willing to somehow go through some of the discomfort that entails? I think most of us understand what I mean, that when we're, in a new community, we have to extend ourselves. We have to push beyond our comfort zones because we are learning something new and different. That to me is part of having an authentic friendship, an authentic relationship with someone, and learning what is it that is near and dear to them. What are the protocols? One of the things that we talked about was indigenous protocols of mutual recognition. This is something that's really, really important. And you'll see a couple of other slides as I continue this conversation that I show how other people have done that. That is indigenous protocols of mutual recognition. One of the things that I think is really important when we're talking about issues of the original peoples on whose land we're living is to be willing to be next to them and support them, behind them or next to them, and support them in what they're doing. This image is from the most recent actions to defend our Kumeyaay sacred sites against the border wall, when before the previous administration was intent on establishing and replacing some of the border fencing that has unfortunately divided the Kumeyaay nation. And there was demolition taking place. I was out there a few times, and that to me is part of earning my place on Kumeyaay land. Next slide. If you're in Los Angeles, you're probably on Tongva land. So what are you doing there? My beautiful sister, Michelle Castillo, and many others have been very, very committed to the defense of Pavunga, sacred site there. For most Native people, our sacred sites are very important. So are you looking at those issues in Los Angeles? Or perhaps maybe you live up near Mount Shasta. And so are you supporting Chief Colleen Sisk and the Winnemem to protect the dam against the damming of the river, to protect the salmon, to protect the cultural practices, especially for me, the rites of passage for young women, and special places where young women and people who are training to be traditional healers will go to fast. We don't want those sacred places to be intruded upon by people who don't know what they're doing, or who may know what they're doing and can insist on the destruction of those sacred locations. There's so many sites. So I hope that you will, really research the area where you're living, and that you support the Native people there in their efforts to protect their native sites, their sacred sites. Next one. We honor original peoples with not just our words, but also our actions. That's why I wanted to show you those other pictures. In 2016 when Standing Rock happened, and so many Native peoples, indigenous peoples from all over answered the call for help. I was at that time living in Colorado, because I make my time between Colorado and here in San Diego. And I was asked if I would give an opening blessing, at a rally for Standing Rock in Boulder. And it was a surprise to me to find out that no one had ever asked permission of Arapaho people or had even invited them to open any kind of gathering with a blessing. So the group that asked me to do this were really taken aback when I told them I can't do that unless I have permission from the Arapaho Nation. And luckily, I did know some of my sisters out there, my relatives, and I reached out to them for their blessing to do this or for them to actually do it. But the same day of the rally in Boulder, it was a very important day in Denver and other places. So I was asked by them to go ahead and give the opening blessing. And I did that, but I did that acknowledging that I stood on Arapaho land. And it was sad, bittersweet that I received an email a few days later that said, and it was from an Indigenous person, that in 20 years that she had lived in Boulder, she had not ever heard anyone give the acknowledgement that they were on Arapaho people's land. And I was fortunate that a few days later, I was able to meet Arapaho elders who were there for Indigenous Peoples Day. And I want to honor their Crawford White, who's passed on since our meeting. He and his wife, Jacqueline, did just some beautiful work there in Boulder. The next slide. And they were very, very appreciative of the work that many people are doing in Boulder to ensure that people understand that they are on Arapaho land and but rather to encourage others to educate themselves on those issues. Those are in the last few years, but currently, as part of the Kanapkohan Coalition, and Kanapkohan, again, is the Kumeyaay words for tell the truth. The coalition consists of Unión del Barrio, of one of the AIM groups. It's made up of Kumeyaay leadership, and we center the Kumeyaay voice. The Kumeyaay leaders are the ones who have the say-so over what we do. So what we started about a year ago, Unión del Barrio came to the original People's Alliance, of which I'm also a part, and they approached us about getting the blessing from Kumeyaay Nation's leadership to go to the city of Chula Vista and say that it's not appropriate that they have the statue of Christopher Columbus at the so-called Discovery Park. And since then, we have been working together very diligently to make sure that people are aware of why it is wrong to have the statue of Christopher Columbus and why it's not correct to name a park after Manifest Destiny. So we've been working very hard together, and on May 25th, Chula Vista City Council will be taking a vote on permanently removing the statue of Christopher Columbus. And in the last couple of weeks, I have been meeting with members of the Sons and Daughters of Italy, and they want to have the statue. So I hope that the city of Chula Vista, the council people there, will take that into consideration, that they can give the statue to someone where it's more appropriate versus a place where Indigenous people are reminded of genocide. That's part of the work, for me at least, of land acknowledgements. One of the other projects that we were involved with was, and we came towards the end, so I want to make sure that I honor the two students who were the ones who really started this whole process of changing the name of the Junipero Serra High School in Tierra Santa. And that's Charlotte Tyla and her sister, and then Annie Doe. They're the ones who started a petition. They went to their principal, Erica Renfrey, for support. to change the name of the school and change the mascot. As we all know, mascots are so problematic. And that needs to be addressed also by San Diego State University and other schools, other universities. So I want to honor these young women. I want to honor Erica Renfrey, their principal, and everybody who was involved in making this happen. They came to Kanapkohan and they met with us. They met with Kumeyaay leaders, and we supported them. Kumeyaay leaders gave them the name for, let me look up. So they changed the name from Junipero Serra High School to Kuatay Kunkun, which is Canyon Hills High School. And they changed the sports team to Awi, which is the Rattlers. So that just happened a few months ago. We're really, really happy about that. So we're making inroads. And I love that we are all really working together. Our communities are coming together because to me, that's, again, part of the healing process, right? That we bring our communities together. That's part of unity and solidarity. Going back to Standing Rock, I always remember when somebody shared a video of the Mexica group that showed up at dawn to introduce themselves and walk onto the camp. And they came with their huevos and they were singing and they were, and everybody was just so excited. And I heard the voice of whoever was videotaping. He said, "The Aztec are coming, the Aztec are coming." It was just so amazing and so wonderful because, again, that's that indigenous protocol of mutual recognition. And you saw my sister, Pua Case, and Hawani, her daughter, and others did the same thing. Nations from around the world came to support Standing Rock, and they all introduced themselves in that way. Healing and togetherness, to me, the solidarity is really important. So I was really glad when we banded together the community of Barrio Logan in Chicano Park and the Kumeyaay Nation together when the Proud Boys and other members of white supremacist groups came to try to deface the murals and trying to shut down Chicano Park, which is sacred to many of us. And I love this image because this is all of us together in solidarity. And we stood arm in arm, linked up against those Proud Boys. And they did not come unto the park. That is solidarity. That is healing our community. As Indigenous people, we stand together for the sacred, whether it's water, the land, holy sites, our cultural practices, our children, we stand together. That's part of our healing work. The next slide, please. And speaking of shared experiences, one of the things that was very shocking to many of us, it was to me, was to see our children, our Indigenous children being placed in inappropriate housing, being caged, being removed from the arms of their children, moms breastfeeding their children and their children ripped from them. For some people, they were shocked because they would say, like, this is not who we are as a country. This is not what we do, because they don't know true history. Our schools haven't taught us about how our families were separated way back since the beginning, really, of the invasion by Europeans. And I want to be really clear that to me, that includes the Spaniards. I've noticed that some people don't seem to link or connect that Spaniards are Europeans. They're Europeans. So this image is from 1950 in Canada when children were forcibly removed from their families. The same thing happened, of course, here in the United States, here in Kumeyaay land. The missions that everybody loves to visit because they're architecturally, they're beautiful. That's where many of our Kumeyaay relatives were enslaved. That's when they were removed They were separated from their children, from their spouses, from their relatives, from their extended family, and forced to labor there. Some of them are still resting under those buildings. And of course, I hope that perhaps Stanley or somebody else, if they haven't already touched on, or John Elliott, will come and share with you that whole story, because that's an important story. That if we want to be allies, we need to learn the story of the mission system, and to remember that that mission system also started in Mexico, and our families were part of that mission system, that were separated by that mission system, that were enslaved by the Jesuits, by the Catholic Church, by the priests, by Junipero Serra's people. So that didn't happen just here. It happened in Mexico, in Baja California, Kumeyaay land over there too. So when people get upset over this, they should get upset. They should get upset that our identity was stolen through those colonizing policies of making our cultural practices illegal, of killing our spiritual leaders, of making sure that we didn't know which tribe we truly belonged to. That's who we are today for some of us as mestizos. So that's part of our healing work. And part of that healing work, I want to commend again all of our relatives here in Kumeyaay land. You see Chairwoman Erica Pinto from Hamul, who's holding that banner, Coalition to Close the Camps here in San Diego, that we all marched. It was a beautiful march. I think you were there, Dulce? Yeah,
Yes.
You were there. It was beautiful. And Raul Chrisman Sr. and his family were leading the march with birdsong. It was, to me, that's how we do it. It was very sacred. And there was thousands of people that we came together in solidarity, in unity, to say that it was wrong. It was wrong when it was first started back in the 1800s, 1900s, to take our children from us, and it's wrong today. It's still wrong to keep families separated. There has to be other ways of helping those families, and I hope they get reunited, because I know that there's still a lot of families that are being separated.
Yes, the most healing aspect of actions like that was having the space to speak up, because we're often screaming at the top of our lungs and not necessarily being heard. And this was a beautiful action taken by the community for the community, and it was so beautiful to see so many different organizations, grassroots, on the ground, and being led by women, people of color, indigenous folk. It was really healing to let go of all of these things that we want people to hear about, and spaces are not often created for us. So we created that space for ourselves with the support of allies and other, like you said, solidarity, other folks coming into the space in support of and not speaking for us, which was very beautiful to see. And healing.
It was very healing, and it was very healing to see other nations, other tribal nations also be a part of it from far away. You know, what was that organization, the Antis organization? Is that right? The Antis, who put clothing together. And some people that I know were really surprised that Native people took this so much to heart, because they didn't understand that for many of us, this is still a trauma that's in our hearts, that it's not, to them, it seems like a long ago, but to us, it's not that long ago that children were taken away. I mean, in my husband's adoptive family, going to visit them in Canada, they're Cree from Sturgeon Lake First Nations up in Canada, and to hear the stories of children being separated and being adopted by white families and not knowing their roots is very painful. Seeing, and I've met some elders up in Canada, and I have worked with some elders and younger people in Canada, both for missing, murdered Indigenous women issues, as well as for healing of the trauma that they carry themselves today. There was an elder who had his tongue cut. He's still alive. So I'm saying this and I'm sharing this in a good way with much love and respect for this elder, because he had nothing but love in his heart. We were at a gathering and he was welcoming everyone, native and non-native. He was equally kind to everyone in spite of what was done to him, in spite of him being taken away from his family, in spite of the torture that he went through. They were never able to steal his soul. And to me, that's really important. That's part of the healing, that we don't give away our power to people like that. That we stand together, that we unify through respectful action and support. Forgive me, I don't know. Hopefully, you guys can hear the it never fails. The gardener comes by. It never fails.
You're super busy, Grace, and we appreciate all of this time and knowledge. And a couple of images over this last summer where you were defending your sacred land against the building of this wall. We were there on a couple of occasions, and it was so heartbreaking. On one of those times, the Border Patrol construction and the private companies were allowed to go in with their big machinery and their trucks into this space that is so sacred to you. And elders were not allowed to go through for a ceremony. Mm-hmm. And the ceremony had to be done outside of that space. And with the songs, it was just so emotional, so heartbreaking, because this is your land and you were not allowed into this space for the purpose of a ceremony where you had elders and rejected from your own land in that way. Mm-hmm. I'm as someone that is not Kumia, that was heartbreaking. I can't even imagine what the elders were feeling like as they were attempting to negotiate the entrance into this sacred land, where we could see the machinery that was there in place to destroy it and blast it.
Yeah, I remember that. And again, I just want to be really clear that even though I was raised with the understanding that we're Kumia, I haven't found any documentation, and I am very grateful to the community for welcoming, but I just want to be really clear. I'm a mestiza, so I want to be respectful of that, so that no one feels that I am overstepping my bounds in claiming a tribal identity that potentially could, I'm not quite sure. But that doesn't stop me from doing the work. It is sacred land. It is meaningful to me. And just to me, all land is sacred. In 2014, Chief Colleen Sis from the Winnemen invited me to go stand with her on her sacred land, on her sacred mountain, Buyum Puyum, and pray with them for 4 days. And that land is sacred to me, and it's meaningful to me too, because that's part of our work as relatives, as all being related. This is all of our ancestral lands, in a sense, because we're related way back. And in the Native way, we're all related. That's why I started with that first slide of the continent, the North and South America, that we're all related. And so that relationship calls us to act in that way. As a relative, your land is sacred to me. So I stood there because this land is sacred to me, not just as someone who is possibly Kumeyaay, but also as a Yaqui woman, as a mestiza, as an indigenous Mexican woman, as someone who loves the land, as someone who loves Tonantzintli Coatlicue, as someone who loves Mut Kumiai. That's why I do it. Our healing in our life comes from the earth, comes from the land. Everything that has happened on the land in which we are living affects us. It becomes a part of us through our breath. The ocean becomes a part of us because of her breath. When we go there, when I go to the ocean, the first thing I do is thank the grandmother ocean for the blessings, and then I can enjoy myself. When I go, if I go, say, on a hike, first thing I do is I put down tobacco and I introduce myself to the guardians and thank them for the blessings of being able to walk on their land. All of those is important to all of us as Indigenous people, and it is all tied in to a land acknowledgement that goes beyond just the words.
Yes, on some of those actions, we saw solidarity from young folk, from Black Lives
I
Matter.
was going to say, Black Lives Matter was there, and they were really they were amazing. Not only were they there, but they made them funds available in case we got arrested. We were out there that and luckily then I don't think any of us did. And I want to say and thank Cynthia. Boy, my mind just went blank, from La Posta, because she is the one who did the first call out, was hers, from La Councilwoman from La Posta. And that's the first day was with her and about 15, 20 Kumiai and a few Chicanos that were out there right next to the explosives. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge her and acknowledge also all the other people that came together. I could say BLM, the street medics were out there. Olympia Beltran was out there with the medics to make sure that we were taken care of. Unión del Barrio was out there. AIM was out there. It was just really just a wonderful, wonderful days of solidarity.
Yeah, Cynthia's leadership was very inspirational.
Yeah.
She was nonstop.
Yeah, that's right. And it's important that we help and support them also, because I know that later on also it was Marta Rodriguez and Stanley, along with our relatives from Baja California, that would gather in Tecate at the port of entry to do ceremony. And that's important because, and it's sad, that they should not have to have that division in order to come together to do ceremony on their own land. That always, I find that so incredibly sad, and I can't imagine how it feels for them in particular, that they have to have special documentation to come from Baja California over here, or to be in ceremony.
Yeah, another interesting observation, Grace, was in one of those points where we were close to the wall, we could see where there was no wall before and where it was torn down to be rebuilt. Like, it's not so hard to imagine a world without a wall, because we didn't have a wall before. And some of those pictures were very clear, where there were Kumiai folk on one side in the shape of a circle, and no wall. So we don't have to imagine what it would be like. That's how it used to be, and we forget that.
Yeah, that's right. But even though there was no wall, there was respect. There was respect between tribal nations. When there's respect, and that goes back to introducing ourselves and the indigenous protocols, right? As mentioned about Standing Rock, or if some of you have been following Elder Pua case in Hawaii with the telescope that they've been trying to put on her sacred mountain, you saw so many people coming and doing ceremony, introducing themselves to the elders before they got onto the sacred mountain. Because again, that's respect. There's no borders, but there's respect. And you don't enter without asking for permission. So we need to also keep that in mind.
Yes. About practicing the solidarity, Grace, any more like tips on how to approach building these relationships? How do we support better? Is there a page that we can look up, or is there a certain group that we can look up for more information on how to stay informed on what's happening. There you have. We have a page on your links all queued up right on time.
Yeah, these are some. I hope that that people will write them down. Well, they'll be able to pause this later, but there's some really good links here, and there's lots of links. Of course, if you just get online, the Beyond Land Acknowledgement in Settler Institutions is a great article. That it's only $15 to download, but it has some really wonderful questions and information. If you want to know where you live, you go to Native Land. It's native land.ca. And then there's Whose Land also. And let's see, also nativegov.org is a really good resource. And go to their Beyond Land Acknowledgement tab. They have a lot of really good information and a lot of good questions, because I think that that's the big part, is the reflection that has to accompany a land acknowledgement, the reflection about your place on this land. It always reminds me of my mom. Sabe, conoce tu lugar. She said, conoce tu lugar. And, she meant it in many different ways depending on the context. And so to me, in this way, is conoce tu lugar, know your place, learn about your place and your place in the community, right? We all have our lugar in our community. And so that's part of the process, the reflection and the understanding of what is happening, the issues that are happening in Kumeyaay land, Tongva, Winnemem land, Lakota. It's your obligation as a guest to find that out, to find out what it is, and then ask if you can be of service. Don't assume that your help is accepted or needed, but you can certainly offer and ask, how can I be of service? How can I be a good ally? And don't be hard on yourself when you make mistakes. I've made tons of mistakes, and I'm grateful that people have been gracious about pointing them out to me in a kind manner, because that's how we learn. So, when we know better, we do better. So have compassion for yourself and for the learning curve. And I hope that the original people on whose land you live have compassion with you as you are learning also. Try to learn what Indigenous protocols are. There's lots of resources online. We don't have enough time to get into all of the little, the different details about it, but there's a lot of resources online that you can look to.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I learned so much from your family indirectly, Grace.
Because you can stop the sharing there. That's okay. We'll stop there. Thank you.
In another plática, you talked about this thing you and your sister have about giving each other permission, and that stuck with me. I have to refer to that all the time and say, Grace gives me permission to take a break.
That's right. I give all of you permission to have compassion for yourselves, to have compassion for the learning curve, and, give you permission if you need it to take a break and, to take care of yourselves, especially, like you, Dulce, and so many other activists. I see you guys out there as those, you're working so hard daily, that I hope that there are people who are supporting you so that you can take a break, that you can take a breath. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, then how can we take care of others? That's why I always tell everybody, take your full moon bath, cleanse yourself, to get rid of all that stuff that you've been carting around, that you maybe took on stuff between the last full moon and this one. It's a good time to say your prayers and purify and let go of ideas and thoughts and energies that are not good for you. To me, that's really important, and the self-care is really important. And I was sharing a story with someone just a couple of days ago. I don't know, remember why exactly it came up, but it reminded me of about 30 years ago when I was working with an elder. I was apprenticing with an elder, and I had been out at his house for about 3 weeks, just really working hard, really working really hard, helping, with his doctoring his people who came to see him. And in those days, there was no, he didn't have a bathroom. The family didn't have like a bathroom, and kids were helping me lug water from the well up to the top of this little hill where I was doing baños for people. And it had been a long day. It was like, I think it was week 3 when I was there. And I was getting ready to have dinner with the family. And his wife and his daughter said, no, you're not going to do anything. Because I was saying, I'm going to go get some, matitas and flowers so I can take a bath, like a little baño. And they said, no, we're going to take care of you. And in the little, it's like a little shack that they had 2 big buckets of water that had been sitting out in the sun, full of flowers and sage. And it was just beautiful. And so they didn't let me bathe myself. They bathed me. And that was just the most amazing feeling. The love and the care and the tenderness and the appreciation and the recognition that I had been working really, really hard, that my sisters took care of me. And there was no bathtub, so I had to just stand there, and they were, with the little buckets and all of that. And that has been the most beautiful, beautiful bath I have ever had. It's the most sacred bath I've ever had. And it was because my sisters made sure that I was taken care of. So I hope that you will allow your sisters and your brothers and your relatives to take care of you, and I'm not just you, Dulce, but all of you who are listening, and that you will also take the initiative to offer the support in whatever way that you have the capacity to do to others.
Yeah, we have a great following of people that follow our mission of love, of an active love to take care of others, and so we often try to remind them, take care of yourself as well to be able to do this work. So that's why we're very appreciative of your talk today, of showing us one other way that we can take care of our community, take care of ourselves, to heal. We're coming from a prior administration where hate was abundant. The rhetoric was coming right from the top leader of this country, and therefore, trickled down and saw so many hateful acts. And still today, it's still people emboldened to speak out on hate. And so we need more of these talks, more conversations like this, so that we can heal. Because we have a long road for us to do this healing work. And it is work, like you said, it takes us out of our comfort zone a lot of times.
Yes. And so, like, one of my young friends, she used to laugh, because how you remember my sister's story, ¿verdad? She remembers, like, that's just being spiritually lazy. Don't be spiritually lazy. You have to do the work. You have to do the work, and part of that work is also the respite, allowing the medicine to enter into your spirit and settle in, so that your presencia becomes filled with that medicine.
I know you do more in-depth talks on how to do this self-care and healing. So we're going to be putting links for your website as well if people want to get a hold of you for that kind of work on themselves. That is very important. We want to encourage people to take care of themselves, because it is draining. It is draining, the work that we do.
It is.
So we'll be providing those links. If anyone has any questions right now, we have just a couple of minutes left in case anyone is wondering about any of our talk today. But I cannot thank you enough, Grace. We really appreciate your time. I know you're super busy as well. So.
I know. Thank you, a ti. Muchas gracias, Dulce. Thank you for all the wonderful work that you do. I really appreciate everything that you are doing, that you and all your team are doing.
Yeah,
And
we don't do it in isolation, Grace. We do it. We try to do this work as a community with many other organizations. Too many to name. It'd be unfair to just mention a few. But we do this in solidarity, and we hope to continue building this relationship with you personally and with the community around us, including our Kumia friends, and supporting each other, offering our support as much as we can, and being respectful. And so I learned a lot, quite a bit today. So thank you. I will be looking into those links that you shared to learn how to be a better ally, because I've done mistakes myself and I'm bound to make more.
that's what we learn. That's how we learn. As long as we remember, as long as we remember and we make the changes and keeping on. That's all we can do.
Yes. Again, and let's see. I don't think our questions are coming in. So, I think there is just appreciation that's coming in. A comment from someone. Thank you for what you're doing. A comment about hope for kids, make them strong for everything. So, thank you, Grace. Just positive vibes that are coming in your way, and we'll keep sending them to you. Muchas
Gracias.
gracias. I don't know if you have any last
No,
things
pues
to say.
nomás aquí estoy para servir a todos. I'm here to be of service. Anything that I can do, just ask. And if I can, I will do it. And you'll be in my prayers. And I ask that Creator continue to bless you with all that you need for yourself, for the organization, and for all the all relatives that you are serving. And blessings, of course, to everybody who's listening to us. May everything that you're doing continue to ripple out and bless everyone else. We need that healing and we need that love. Thank you.
Sí, muchísimas gracias, Grace. Thank you to everyone that's watching this. Please share this. And if you want to look at Dr. Stanley Rodriguez's talk from earlier in the year, we'll be putting it on our website as well. Thank you.